then you have someone, say like the Buddha. Now, the Buddha, has an experience, and I think his experience was no different than, say, Jesus or Muhammad. He experienced something, he saw something, but he was wise enough to know that not everyone has the capacity and the endurance to go through what he went through and to experience what he experienced. He also knew the trappings of the mind. He also knew the trappings of language. And he wasn't made for the cave, He had a soul that, and his temperament, he looked out there and he saw, people suffer. They suffer in so many different ways. And it's not because they just get old, they get sick and they die. They suffer because every experience gets old, every experience gets sick, every experience eventually dies, and then you're left abandoned. And then you have to do therapy, and then you have to be sad, and then you have to be angry, and your life is just wasted. And it's something we talked about earlier, that all you are is a physical self, all you are is an emotional self. And then you kind of look at your life and you say, man, it's been a complete waste. So what he did, which was really, really, I think, interesting, is his soul was made for the world in the sense that, unlike the monks, in Greece, in the caves, he was empathetic. He cared. He wanted people to live a relatively decent emotional, psychological, intellectual life. You may not be able to get rid of poverty, but you could live in poverty with a good amount of dignity. Your husband or your wife may not come back, but you could have enough self-respect to deal with divorce in a way that is noble and dignified. And the message of the Buddha is very much like that. That I'm not going to, have my teachings sit in a cave somewhere where no one hears them. I think my teachings can help people. And so his soul was made for the world. Now the world has a variety of different branches, and he had a soul that was very diverse. It was like a buffet. He could talk about relationships. He could talk about the death of a son or the death of a daughter. He could talk about marriage. He could talk about all sorts of things. It could be high, it could be low. He was like 7-Eleven, he was Costco, he was Safeway, he was, everything. And the truth is, you don't really know exactly. If you were to find your soul, first, when we talk about souls, remember, you really have to bypass a good amount of various layers of just being human until you reach this part where you say, I'm not looking for the desires of the body, I'm not looking for the desires of the emotions, I'm not looking for the desires of psychology, because I don't know if when people have trauma, for example, or if they have an emotion that they can't deal with themselves, they pick up the phone, they call their friends, and they talk about like their anger issues or disappointment issue, whatever the case may be, for hours, do you see? And then they don't care about the intellectual desires. And the only thing they have is the desire to understand, first to see whether or not they have a soul. And if they have an experience where they say, well, this is what it means by a soul, they want to have an intimate relationship where the soul is constant. Once you have captured whatever it is you're looking for, then the question is, well, what are you going to do with it? That's when you will understand how you're made. Are you made for one person? Are you made for 10 people? Are you made, like Malcolm X, for an entire community of people? What are you made? So even if you look at, for example, the Gospel of Matthew and Luke, it's really quite different. In the Gospel of Matthew, the soul of Jesus is made only for the Jews. In the Gospel of Luke, the soul of Jesus is not just made for the Jews, it's made because in the genealogy it goes all the way back to Adam. In Matthew, it goes all the way back to Abraham. Abraham becomes the father of the Jews, but Adam becomes father of humanity. And all of a sudden you realize, well, this is not the Jesus of the Matthew. This is the Jesus who's grand, who allows everyone to sit at his table. He's like Malcolm X. And it's only when you have realized something and then you sit back and you say, okay, do I want to just keep this to myself or do I want to spend it? There are, I guess, some people who like to spend it, and there are some people who just like to keep it for themselves.